Well, hello everyone. Welcome to another Spotlight session. I am very, very excited about this session today because we are going to be talking about this thing called Chat GPT. And you might have heard a little bit about Chat GPT because it's been on the news a little bit and there's been a little bit of talk. And I must admit, I have something gone, okay, Chat GPT, I'm not sure I quite get this. And so we thought, you know what, we really, really need to have a session on ChatGPT, and we need to talk to our wonderful community about, let's start off with, hey, what does ChatGPT mean for you? You know, how do we think about ChatGPT? And this session, what we hope today, it will give you a landscape and some ideas on how could I use ChatGPT? It's a real start. We don't want to get too much into kind of the conversation about ethics or the ethics of AI and things like this. I don't think that's the area we really want to go down. We want to just actually maybe give you some ideas and thoughts where you can go away and explore and look at ChatGPT for yourself and see if it can it help you save time? Can it help you plan your lessons? Can it help you engage your students more? And so I have two wonderful guests who actually know something about ChatGPT, unlike myself. So I think Lynn Thomas needs very little introduction to many of you. Now, Lynn has a fancy new job and a fancy new job title. Congratulations, Lynn. I think you're moving to your new job pretty soon. You haven't started yet. She's basically going to be ed tech superstar teacher, I think, along those lines. Maybe that's not quite the right word, but it's a new role, Lynn, which is fantastic. Many of you will have seen the fantastic Lynn with us before. And then Timothy, who I'm delighted to have with us at 4:30 in the morning, must I say. And I'm going to try and get this right, Timothy. We've been practicing this. Timothy is from the Information Communication Technology Council of Canada.
Well done.
Yeah, I got it right. And Timothy is a specialist kind of tech teacher with a background in the world of tech. There you go. And so Timothy, and he's out doing some fantastic things around quantum at the moment, is going to talk to you about some of the examples of how he has used ChatGPT with his classrooms and AI and the experience he's had. And he's been really at the forefront of this. So I am delighted, Lynn and Timothy. Thank you so much for joining us both. The structure of today is I'm going to ask Lynn to speak first for about 15 minutes, Timothy to speak first for about 15 minutes. They're going to give you some examples of how they have used ChatGPT and AI in learning. So to give you some real concrete ones. Lynn's also going to give us an intro on kind of how do we think about ChatGPT. As always, we will go then into a kind of open discussion. We'd love your questions. I want to be really, really practical. So think about, how can I use this? How do I take this forward? As always, we love to see you. We love to hear from you. So either drop your questions in the chat or raise your hand. Come on screen when it's time to do the Q&As. We want to make this as interactive as possible for everybody. So please do that. We will obviously be sharing everything afterwards as well. So without further ado, Lynn, what's this ChatGPT malarkey then? Can you tell us all about it?
Well, yeah, it's an interesting one, that is for sure. That is, I think, going to really shake up the whole world, not just the education sector. And if you give me a minute, I will share my screen. Oh, I want to do that. Share, because I might just pop out to ChatGPT to show you. So we'll just go here. There we go. The lovely world of ChatGPT. So basically, what is ChatGPT? Well, in essence, it's an advanced language model, which sounds really fancy, but it is an AI developed by OpenAI, but it's designed to generate human-like responses. In other words, be conversational and interact in interactive conversations. So that's what makes it really different from previous AI that you needed a lot of coding and that kind of thing to be able to really use it and interact with it. Whereas ChatGPT has made it where anybody can, because it's conversational. You don't need like a computer science background to be able to use it. So how does it work? Well, it uses algorithms like most AI to do natural language processing, and excuse me, and it is pre-trained on a vast amount of information, and then it can produce responses. So they call all the information that it goes from tokens. So it predicts the next token based on previous ones. So it's, as I said, trained on this massive corpus of data. So books, articles, documents, all different topic styles and genres from all over the place. And so it basically learns the patterns and relationships of text and how it goes together. So that's how it can put together this conversational text conversation back and forth to you. So it's in a really simplistic way and not perfect here. It's a little like, finish the sentence game. You start the sentence and you can kind of predict what the next word is. And that's sort of what ChatGPT can do, obviously at a way bigger, better scale. So how can we think about this in relation to our classrooms? And I know there's been articles out there that, were doom and gloom and alarming, but the potential is what I'm really excited about, because it has the potential to enhance student engagement, personalize the learning experience, give immediate feedback, and really encourage critical thinking. So I want to tell you about a few experiences that I've had in my classrooms and ways I've used it that can kind of show you each of these things. So, for example, I asked ChatGPT to write me a poem. Write me a poem about puppies. So it wrote me this poem. It had stanzas, verses, it rhymed, it used poetic devices, but it was a pretty, I would say, as an English teacher, crappy poem, because it was really cliche, and it was just one of those ones where you're just like, oh, this sounds like a Hallmark card, but worse. So I showed that to my students. For one, they were instantly engaged because they could watch the poem being written up on my whiteboard and were amazed at the speed. But then when they really started looking at it, we talked about, let's pick out the poetic devices, because that's what we had been working on, and they were able to do that. But then we talked about the poem's merits. And this is where I saw a deeper level of critical thinking from my students than I had trying to do other poetry by, established poets. And I think part of that is the fact that students, a lot of times, well, what's the right answer? And if it's an established poet, they know out there somewhere, there's a right answer to this, or they feel that there is. As opposed to this was just written 10 seconds ago by an AI. There is no pre-established what's the right answer. So they were far more willing to pick it apart than otherwise. So I found that really, really interesting. And they were completely engaged. Some of it, I'm sure, was a bit of the novelty of it because they hadn't really seen ChatGPT in action before, but they really got a lot out of picking apart that poem. And I love the fact that it also showed them that, this language model is really cool, but it's not perfect. You need to really critically analyze what it's giving you, or else you're not going to get what you want. So it's not the be all and end all, which I hoped was kind of would take care of the other issue that a lot of teachers have, is like, they're just going to use it for all their work. I think this showed them that, well, you can't use it for all your work because it's going to give you kind of awful stuff in certain cases, right? So I thought that was really awesome. Another way that I have used it is immediate feedback. Now, this is really super awesome and I love it. So I very often give, small little chunks of writing to students so that I, thinking that I'll then be able to give them faster feedback, because we know that that immediate feedback is really important for student learning. Well, it's English. I have 30 kids. It's a lot of reading, and I have never, ever been happy with how quickly I am able to give feedback. So this is awesome because I could tell Chat GPT, this is the criteria that I'm looking at, and paste in the student's paragraph and say, give me some feedback on this. And I have even asked it, hey, give me, what would you give this, say, out of 20 if I wanted a mark? Often I just want the feedback. And in 99% of the cases, it gave the exact feedback that I would have given. So it was very accurate. Furthermore, it gave far more feedback than I probably would have given because of my time constraints. I would never be able to write a paragraph back to a student and each and every one of my students for everything they did, where Chat GPT can do it in seconds. So then I was able to then give that feedback to my students, and it's rich and quick. And I think that's just amazing. Another way to view this is, I think it would be awesome, and I want to incorporate this in the future, to use it as part of the writing process. We often say, okay, write your draft, and then you're going to edit and proofread. Well, what if we write our draft and we can paste, our original work in Chat GPT and ask for feedback? It's similar to using, a program that's going to correct my grammar and spelling. It's just going to give me some other avenues and ideas that maybe style-wise, as I said, they could paste in the criteria, and it can tell them things like, your thesis statement is confusing, or you haven't used quotes, or you have some grammar and sentence structure errors. So I think it can be a really valuable thing for students to use, because again, it can give them instant feedback that otherwise would take far longer for people to get. It can also personalize the learning experience. And I think this was so really cool, and differentiate. So if you have a class of varied abilities, often, you might have a reading, but it's easy for some and very difficult for others. How do you have leveled readings? So this is great because I could take that text, put it in Chat GPT. Let's say it was written at a grade 12 level. I can ask it to give me this text at a grade 8 level, and it will rewrite it in a simplified manner. So I can then personalize and differentiate for my students by giving the people who need a little simpler text to be able to do the work. I can give that to them, and they're still getting the same text in essence, just in a simplified form. And so I can do this with any text that I use, which I think is like amazing. So basically, we can also look at it as the most awesome teacher assistant. I have asked it to write lesson plans, give me unit outlines. I complete with learning goals tied to my curriculum. I can just ask it and tell it, I want you to go with the Ontario curriculum for English, And because of all the vast data that it has mined, it knows what that is. It can create review content. I've used it to help me write quizzes, multiple choice question quizzes. As I said, create level texts. It can help you write report card comments, which is pretty cool because sometimes you get really stuck on what to say. It can summarize a text for you. It can write emails and letters. Talking to another colleague yesterday, another really great one for student use as well as your own use. They had a student who was going for an interview for a really big scholarship. And so what they did was they took her, basically her resume, and they told Chat GPT to take on a role. So you are the student, is basically what they said. You are this student. And then they gave Chat GPT their CV, their resume, and then they loaded all kinds of questions that have been asked in the past for this scholarship process. And then the student was able to practice and see exemplar answers for all of these questions. So I thought that was awesome. If you think for job interviews or anything like that, as a practice means, is really powerful. I've also put the link in here so you can see far more ideas than I've ever had for ways to use ChatGPT to save time. So obviously we do need to think about ethical use, the idea of augmenting and not replacing. Obviously, we know as teachers, overseeing those interactions are going to ensure safe and focused learning and proper use. AI is here and it's part of our future, and we need to teach our students to use it well. And it's always going to have, this is the worst version they're ever going to see. It's only going to get better. So I think it's essential that we really bring this and embrace it to a certain extent and show our students how it can be used in positive, good ways. So, yeah, as I said, I think it's really exciting. I know I'm probably going a little overtime here, but by incorporating ChatGPT into our educational journey, we can really foster creativity and critical thinking and collaboration with our students. And we can use it to create really enriching, immersive educational experiences for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lynn. I have so many questions. There's so many interesting use cases and examples here, but I might let me bite my tongue for now. I'm sure everyone else has got some as well. So do start firing them down in the chat. But I'd love to now bring in Timothy. So Timothy, you've obviously been using AI for quite a while now, especially in the sort of computer science type area. So please do take the floor and tell everyone what have you been up to, and you've got some incredible kind of examples.
All right. So I think my screen's up there.
Yeah.
I'm coming at this from a bit of a different place. Lynn and I are both English teachers, and that's what I was doing before. So, but what I did was I used to work in IT, so I've migrated into teaching computer technology. One of the things I did though, when I was still teaching English, was I focused on technology. So we were blogging in the early, 2010s and things like that. When Turnitin came out, that's a plagiarism checker that was popular for a while. My senior English students, we would actually try and beat it. So we would go and find ways to try and beat Turnitin and get it to accept an essay that was plagiarized. And then look at it. And what was interesting is after playing with that for about a week, the student said you can do it, but it's more work to do that than it is to just write the essay. So I've always come at technology that way. My feeling is, if it's actually helping us, great. But if it's being used as an excuse to do work for us that we should be doing ourselves, then it's not so good. As far as AI goes, I've been teaching computer tech for the last decade, and we got into it early. In 2015, we started a game development program. So let's see if I can bounce over to my PowerPoint here. Here we go. Oh, PowerPoint, you're so needlessly complicated. Yeah, I'll just do it this way.
Just on
So
the, just on
in
the
our
bottom right, just on the bottom right, Timothy, just down by the Zoom, just these, yeah, just there, the one to the right, that one there.
slideshow. There we go.
Slideshow.
I'm in business. All right. Yeah, I come from a Google board, so I am not used to Microsoft things at all, and suddenly I'm immersed in Microsoft. So as I said, we got started in AI probably 2015, 2016 when we got into Unity. We started a game development program. I had students come to me and say, we're teaching ourselves game development at home. And I thought, well, that seems like a shame. If you're doing that, there's probably a bunch of students who want to learn it. So we started the program. We connected with Unity, and at the time you had to script all your own Unity. It's much easier now. Unity is all plug and play, and it's almost more like scratch coding. But back in the day, we had to get a handle on scripts. And one of the first things that happened for us was we had to figure out how to do AI. Because if you've got an enemy player in the game, it has to follow you and to attack you, or it has to run away and you have to chase it. And that algorithm, working out how to do that was basic AI, but we weren't using an existing system. We had to develop that from scratch. So it's an adaptive algorithm. It's kind of the most basic kind of AI. The player character does a move, and based on how that variable is changing, the non-player character reacts to it in a way that seems realistic. So for us, our AI started in our game development program, and the students that are doing it, it was probably the hardest part of our coding for game development. Everything else came much easier to us, but AI was the thing that we always tripped up on. I think it took us 3 years to actually figure out how to get it right. And what we did once we figured it out, we would save those scripts, and then the students the next year could start with those scripts and build on them. So when I left the program in 2022, we had 5 years of developed AI scripts that had gotten more and more complicated. So that was one approach into it that we did early. I've got some links here, and I've shared this in the chat. So if you want to go follow the links, you can. But I'm afraid to go off piste here because I'm in one window and it'll go to another. But in the case of the adventure game there at the top, if you click on that link and go look at the tweet, you'll see the enemy AI and the way it works and how they sort of come at the player character. And as you go down through these in 2021, Quinn was one of our top coding students. And he was really focused on getting that AI perfected. So in that link, when you go to look at that later, you'll see how it's responding to the player character. And in 2021 spring, we had Matteo, who was the top coding student in Ontario last year. And Matteo is a genius. I love watching him work. Half the time I have no idea what he's doing, but it's my favorite kind of student. So and what Matteo did was he perfected this script where the enemy would attack you, but if the enemy became too weak, it would run away. So suddenly our gameplay achieved a level of depth that we'd never had before. And that was really thrilling to see. It felt like we were actually putting intelligence into the things in our game. It was thrilling to watch. Because of the game development, I thought maybe there's a way we can bring AI in earlier and just maybe get students thinking about it in terms of how we can integrate it, because a lot of my grade 9s go on to the game dev class. By dumb luck, Gordon's son Ian was in my grade 9 class in 2017, 2018. And Gordon happened to work on the team that did the Jeopardy challenge with the Watson computer for IBM. So we have a groundbreaking AI scientist whose kid happens to be in my classroom. So there's Gordon there on the screen. You can see him bottom left, and he volunteered to come in. IBM gives their employees time to go and do charitable outreach. So Gordon came in and showed us how to get going with the AI chatbot. And what the Watson AI chatbot does is it teaches you how to code a chatbot that uses the AI core. So instead of doing coding where you've got variables and simple things like that, this works in quite a different way. But what we found was it's actually easier than regular coding because the AI takes over and helps you. So Gordon came in and got us started, and then here's students again. They're presenting to him, and they're showing him their chatbots. And as you can see, it's different from coding. Instead of having variables, you have intent. And the intent is what you're hoping will happen. And then the AI iterates from that and actually learns from the responses. So when the student chatbots would first come up, we would get a set of responses. And as the chatbot learned, as we would all practice on each other's chatbots, the chatbot would get smarter. So like Lynn said earlier, this is the worst version of Chat GPT you'll ever see. This is the same kind of thing. It's not the same moment to moment. It keeps changing. So we would have a chatbot at the beginning that seemed kind of, stunted and it wasn't working properly. And then through massaging the human side of the code and then letting the system train, it got better and better. So this taught us the training. But the other cool thing about the chatbot is you can integrate it into anything. So later on, we had the chatbot actually running in a Unity game as one of the player characters. So we had AI that we developed ourselves so the thing could move around, and then we had connected it to the IBM AI so it could speak like a person would speak. And it didn't always respond the same way. So instead of a coded response where you would say hello and it would say hello, based on your player character actions, it would respond to you in different ways, which gives you a whole new level of depth in your game design. This is what a chatbot looks like. So it gives you a little box you can practice in, which is great too. So it's very iterative. Just from an English side, Lynn, that's pretty exciting. If you've never done the chatbot thing, there's a lot of language in it. So you could work on this from a language side because the coding is so easy. It really doesn't get in the way. And we had students do everything. So we had one there, you can see there's one from the Matrix. So you can speak to Neo from the Matrix and he'll respond to you and, tell you how to fight the machines. And that's the student being smart, right? Here we are using AI and the first thing the student thought of was I'm in the Matrix and, they give that response. We have, and what's nice about this is if you've got some students who maybe aren't very technical, in this case, the student really loved skiing. So he went and picked his favorite local ski resort at Blue Mountain in Ontario. And he made a chat bot about what kind of skis you should use and what kind of equipment based on the type of snow and everything else. And he had a weather forecast built into it. And the chat bot would chat to you about your ski trip this weekend and what you need to bring with you. So it's really a wide variety of things you can do with it. Here's another one. The guy on the left wants to be a pilot. So he did identify this plane thing, and you can integrate media into the chatbot. So he put a picture of the 747 up there, and you have to respond and say what kind of plane it is. And again, just to emphasize this, if you don't like AI, wait 5 minutes. In the case of the IBM chatbot, we were off for the summer, and when we came back in the fall, it had gone way better over the summer. We came back and suddenly it could do all these additional things that we didn't know, and the coding was even easier. So now we've brought this all the way down to grade 9 as an introductory coding thing. We thought it would be way too complicated, but as an introduction to coding for students who have never done that kind of work before, it's a very gentle introduction. And it's because the AI is helping you. So from a teaching perspective, that's pedagogically really interesting. You've got the technology supporting you and helping you learn. It's not replacing your learning, it's actually assisting it. So it's an emphasis thing there. This is actually where we started touching Chat GPT because GitHub's Copilot is based on that. So GitHub, in case you don't know, is a repository for putting code so people can share their code and everybody can try it. In 2022, they came up with Copilot, which is an AI coding assistant. And so again, I did the same thing we did with the Turnitin. I was like, hack this thing, like see if you can, like, what is it? Let's actually integrate it rather than banning it. Last spring, everybody was banning it in comp sci. They were like, no, you can't use this. And I said, let's not do that. Everyone's going to use it for their first coding project, and then you're going to assess it for me and tell me whether it works for you or not. And what was interesting was the students who were not very good at coding really didn't like it because it would do things that they didn't understand, and then they couldn't correct it. And like Lynn was saying earlier, it doesn't always give you good responses. So if you're bad at coding and you get this to do your coding for you, it makes you worse. But here's the tricky bit. When Matteo got on it, and again, he was the top coder in Ontario last year, he said it's really bad at making new logic, but for recursive things like making loops, it's fantastic because it knows what you want. It's very clear. So he said it sped up my coding 30 to 40%. Matteo still needs to have his eye on it, and he needs to see how it's all working. But the code itself, he's so much faster. And I suspect for writing, it would be the same way in English. If you use this as a tool to assist you, you've still got to be very good at writing to make it not seem, puerile and hallmarky. But what you need to do is have that human touch in there. So the human's still the pilot here. The human is the one doing the work and coming up with the original ideas and giving it life. But the machine can take care of a lot of the background work for you. And they said it was like coding with an alien. Sometimes it would do very odd things, and we would all sit there, why did it do that, and try and figure out what was going on with it. But rather, again, than ban it or anything like that, what we did was look straight at it and try and understand how it worked, and then continue like that. So GitHub Copilot is free to use. If you're on GitHub and you want to do some coding, you can just jump in and grab that. The other thing we got into was machine image generation. And this is actually my favorite part. I've also got a background in visual art. So I got into DALL-E and Wombo and all of the AI image generation. And that picture on there is generated by AI. So that's an AI image generation based on that prompt where, artificial intelligence does all the learning for the human students and like that kind of thing. And this is what it gave me in a pixel, in a pixel art style. So you can tell it what style you want. It'll give you that, and it'll give you a response. But this emphasizes the skill you need when you're working with AI. Wired did a great article. There's a link on it at the end of this that I would really suggest you go read. And in the article, they talked about AI whispering as a new media, like a digital media literacy. And again, ignoring this means that we're not going to be able to use it very well. But if we integrate that and we actually teach AI whispering, that's where the power of this is. And then we're empowering people with it instead of running them over. But it amazes me that it can produce images like that have real poignancy to them, but just out of nowhere. So my favorite quote during this whole panic, and again, we've been doing this for 7 years, so we were kind of diehard about it, like, welcome to the party, pal. But AI won't replace us, but someone using it will replace you. Because again, you think to Matteo, if he's going for a coding job, Matteo can code 30% faster than someone who's as good as he is, because he's using AI to turbocharge his work. So it's a way of looking at it. So my feeling is, like Lynn said, we want to integrate AI. You don't want to just ignore it. You throw a blanket on it and you're actually doing a disservice to your students. But what you want to emphasize for them is it's a tool that can empower you and help your thinking and make your output better. But it doesn't replace you. And the minute you let it replace you, it's going to replace you. So another way to look at this is AI will replace you if you let it. And again, as educators, I think it's really important that we don't let that happen. So that's my angle from the engineering side of things, since I defected from English all those years ago. I'm on the T4 community, so I'd be happy to talk to you there. And you can find me on LinkedIn and Twitter as well. So that's it for me.
Well, thank you so much, Timothy. And Lynn, what a incredible introduction. I must say my head is slightly blown. But at this point, I'm going to open it all up. So please get ready with your questions. I've got a few things I wanted to ask our wonderful panelists, first of all. I really, really loved, and just probably my attention went straight to your examples where you talked about how this can assist you. So this, and especially when we think about, we all know teachers all around the world don't have enough time, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when we talk about saving time, so Lynn, you gave the example about it was helping with the feedback loop, and
Mm-hmm.
Timothy, you gave similar examples about how it can assist and save time. Can I just check, Lynn? So in that kind of scenario, so writing feedback, you gave the example about your the feedback on the score. Would you check each one? How would you, so you would provide the prompt, you put the feedback in, are you then looking at each piece of feedback that it comes back with, or were you happy to let it go? How are you approaching that?
I was definitely skimming all of them, but I guess the difference is, one, it writes that feedback in like less than 30 seconds.
Yeah.
I can't type that fast. And nor can I think that fast, put it into, sentences that are going to be responsive to the student. I can't do all that fast and do like a paragraph or more.
Did you find yourself having to amend much, or you're literally like kind of like, this is just?
No, it was other than pronouns. Right. So I hadn't quite perfected, like I said, okay, I want you to write in first person, but it kept saying the author did this. And I'm like, well, I'm talking to a student. So, you need to say you, not the author or whatever.
Okay.
So I would have to go and edit slightly, but to mark a full class set and give the feedback was less than 20% of the time I would have taken myself.
Wow. And that's incredible. And that's something.
Yeah. And if you think about that, for all the things that teachers do that are very repetitive, that, it's still part of the job that we must do. Marking is not necessarily the repetitive thing, but writing emails, even writing letters of reference. My colleague yesterday mentioned that as well. He said, yeah, I gave it the information and it wrote the best letter of reference I've ever written. So, because that takes a lot of brain power, right? And I often feel like teachers are probably right up there in the top 10 for cognitive overload, because there's just so much going on. There's so many decisions that we have to make every day, and coming up with feedback is part of that. And that's what's really draining. And if you can use an assistant like this to do some of those tasks, it's freeing up brain space.
So one other one that's
really
been mentioned,
interact with your students.
Because one other thing you mentioned, Lynn, and there's been mentioned a lot, is lesson planning. And there's a lot of talk about then personalized lesson planning, which has always been the holy, personalized learning paths, personalized learning plans. How do you go about building a lesson plan in ChatGPT? Can you just talk us through, well, how does that work?
So again, this is where the human creativity comes in. I need to know, what am I doing? What am I teaching on, et cetera, right? Like, those are my ideas. So then I'm just basically saying, okay, I want you to write a lesson plan. I want you to include learning goals and success criteria. This is the topic. It needs to relate to this curriculum. If there is a certain strategy I want to use, like Jigsaw or something, I might add that in there as well. And it will give me a lesson plan, complete with materials I need, success criteria, everything. And the wonderful thing is you can have a conversation with it. So if I read through and go, okay, that's kind of boring, or it's not quite what I wanted, I can then just say, or, you forgot to put something in the prompt in the first place. Then I can say, oh, I need you to fix this. And it'll give you a new iteration. Or I need you to change this, or I want you to add this and give me a rubric. And it will do that because it remembers what it told you before.
Right.
That,
would you always build like if you think about, okay, I always want this kind of structure to my lesson plan. Could you like create yourself a template there that you say, using this template, build me this lesson?
Yep. And it'll remember that. Yeah. I was really intrigued by my colleague yesterday saying you can give it a role. Because I was like, oh, okay, you're an architect. How would you handle this problem? Because then it's going to give you the answer from that perspective, as opposed to, say, another one, which I thought was really, really cool.
That's awesome. Timothy, like when we think about saving teachers time, so less so about focusing on the saving time piece, where do you get excited? Where do you see the sort of opportunities?
I've honestly, I made a note here and I said, we've got a lot of industrial habits in education. And if AI is just going to make those easier, then I'm tempted to take a philosophical step back and say, should we still be doing those habits rather than letting a machine take over and I don't know, interact with students or whatever else? Because at that point, it becomes maybe a little bit slippery, because at what point do you say, well, maybe we just need less teachers and more AIs talking to students? So I don't know. I mean, I teach technology, but I'm pretty analog when it comes to those relationships and my understanding of the student. I still approach it really holistically. So if I feel like I haven't been hands-on with my response to them and we've developed a relationship, I'm always afraid they're going to say something like, well, you said this in your reply to my last thing. And I'm like, yeah, actually I didn't. Chat GPT did. And then where does that put you in terms of a teacher-student relationship? So I'm cautious when it comes to doing things like that. What I'd really like to see us do is just revise the education system so that we're not following these 19th century habits we developed. That would be nicer. And then we could start applying AI in a way that just enhances what we're doing. The other thing I think is interesting here, though, is the way Lynn is talking about talking to the machine. And I think over the next 10 years, you're going to see how we talk to each other change because of that. It's going to change communication, because as people get used to speaking to machines in a certain way, I think it's going to leak back into how we talk to each other too. And I think watching that happen is going to be complicated as well, because the machine's going to want things very, it's not going to like metaphor. It's going to like really clear, concise, detailed direction. So in a way, like maybe this is the end of figurative language as we know it. That's heartbreaking.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I would never want that to happen. I think that's where AI falls down, right? Like that's where it's like, yes, it's a good assistant. I'm not going to use a ton of metaphors in an email. So, okay, I'm good, write the standard email.
I do all the time.
But that's understanding the differences, right? Understanding when you should.
Depending on what the situation is, right? Like a standard kind of email that I write that, oh, you're missing this many assignments. I'm not going to use a lot of metaphors, right? But again, it's how you use it, and I would strongly say that it needs to be closely monitored, right? Like, I know exactly what it said to all my students when I used it for that feedback loop, but I also edited it, and I also made sure that, yeah, that's what I probably, that's what I would have said too, right? So I was definitely monitoring it
Yeah.
closely.
You weren't.
And I think
Yeah.
that can also be the beauty of it with students, is because it requires that sort of monitoring and critical thinking. And we're always talking about how much we want our students to be critical thinkers. And I think this can be a really good avenue to really strengthen that skill.
I was going to just actually come on to that actually, but before I do, just because that was one of the other things I really took out, your example about poetry and how
Mhm.
you can think about so that you can throw up and just throw examples and get the students to criticize and all of those things we
Yeah,
talk
yeah.
about 21st century learning and workforce skills going into critical thinking. Such an important point. But I also really want to make sure we get some questions in from the audience. So anybody would like to come and ask some questions or get some points, please jump on now, put your hands up, put questions in the chat. Welcome to come and ask questions or join in. Really love for that to happen. So please do. But whilst anyone's thinking about any questions or doing that, I'll keep an eye on the chat. And I think, by the way, and I was 100% going to agreeing. I think we're straight away getting a request for, can we do a lesson plan workshop? And can we do there's going to be some practical workshop requests coming in. I see you push for yes, 100%. I saw that and I thought the same. Let's talk about critical thinking. So I love that example of poetry, and I loved your example of the coding side, Timothy, where you say you're the coding whiz kid who was there pulling it apart, saying, okay, how do I use this? How do I take this better? That is really powerful, right? Especially when we think about the skills we need in the workforce moving forward. Where else do we go with those kind of critical thinking things? I suppose it's teaching the kids how to think about AI, but how to question, right? What's right, what's wrong? Where do you see that developing?
In our case, I had another just spectacular coder. I probably the smartest student I've ever had. She was autistic, but just her ability to consider large data sets was just simply exceptional. And she actually built like she just did a co-op and sat in my office and built from scratch an algorithm that let her comb through a large data set, pull information out of it, and based on the information it found, actually change itself. So she was building AI without realizing it. Change itself so it would like refine the search as it was going, and then when she was done, she would pull the details out of it, and it would give us something that looked like a human being had combed this data and considered it in a really thoughtful way and produced exactly what we were looking for. So it had that refinement that in it, but the refinement's still in it because Rachel actually put it into the code. So even though you're one removed, if you're still coding with it, and you've still got your hands on the data, you're still deeply involved in it. So it's not like you're not offloading the work. And I think that's the moment, that's the reflex you've got to watch for, where you think, I'm just going to let this take over and I'm not even looking anymore. I don't care. And if that's the case, why don't you care? And maybe there's a reason why you don't, and that's a good thing to be aware of. But when you're using it, like it should empower what you're doing. It shouldn't replace it. So
100%, 100%.